and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this CIVITAS webinar on mobility as a service. CIVITAS delivers. This webinar is organized by three projects and one organization, CIVITAS Satellite, the CIVITAS Initiative Coordination and Support Action, and two innovation actions under CIVITAS 2020, CIVITAS ECCENTRIC and CIVITAS PORTIS. For your information, the webinar will be recorded, and that means that you can also access the recordings after this event, together with the presentations of the presenters. They will be made available as well. Small reminder for the speakers, you will be on mute while the other presenters are speaking, and at the end of the event, we all come together in the plenary to answer questions from the audience, and these questions can be posted in the Q&A, but also feel free to use the chat function of this of the Zoom webinar tool. This webinar is set in a series of webinars that POLIS is organizing, a series called Mobilising Mobility. And the purpose of these webinars is to turn European transport innovation into local action. We are looking at the best EU research that has been happening on specific urban mobility topics and bring that to you in a structured way to learn and to also see what's happening outside your own cities. So we're working on several topics in this series. You find here the calendar for next month, and I would specifically like to highlight the Thursday 19 November webinar, where again we are returning with the CIVITAS community to mobility as a service, and where we will be talking about crossing modal borders. But today we talk about how 3 CIVITAS cities have delivered MaaS over the past 4 to 5 years. The 3 cities in question, Antwerp, Madrid, and Turku, are demonstrator cities or lighthouse cities in CIVITAS innovation actions. And they have gone through a process that's currently ending, a process of 4 years to in detail investigate urban mobility innovation, specific measures, but also packages of different measures. And in that regard, MaaS is of course an interesting topic because it also has the capability to integrate specific mobility solutions that have been tested in these CIVITAS cities. Preparing this webinar, I was thinking of these 4 years, these 4 to 5 years that the projects have been running, which means also that they have been conceptualized even earlier, because you have to bring a project proposal to the European Commission. That needs to be evaluated, and then half a year later you might be starting. So that means that the initial thoughts about mobility as a service in these cities has been designed at least half a decade ago. And we all know how the world was different in 2015, 2016. And I just want to highlight the questions that we as POLIS put forward in that era regarding mobility as a service. It was then at that time a novelty, let's say, a new kid on the block. I'm not going to read the questions aloud, but it is clear that the thoughts we were having was that Europe is very diverse, and mobility practices in cities are diverse. So how does MaaS relate to that? How far can we go, or how do we organize public sector oversight? What is the business case for third-party mobility as a service offers, and etc. So fundamental questions from a network of cities and regions on how MaaS would evolve or would need to be shaped to serve public goals. And these were our recommendations at that time. Again, I'm not going to read it, but we were very cautious of understanding how MaaS would impact travel behavior, understanding the best market environment and regulation for MaaS, and also understand the business model, who would pay, but also how MaaS could influence how transport authorities would procure mobility services. So a long list of questions, and I'm very curious to see to what degree our speakers will answer that. We are now 2020. MaaS has moved on. The cities have done their research, and I'm curious to hear how this all has evolved. And I would first like to give the floor to Stijn Vernijen. He's working for the city of Antwerp and has managed the MaaS process in CIVITAS PORTIS for the city of Antwerp. So Stijn, the floor is yours, and I will fade into the distance, the near distance, but
yeah, if you stop sharing your screen, I can start sharing my screen.
I will do that.
Share, okay. I think it's screen 2, sorry. Okay, can you see everything well? I hope so.
Not yet, but maybe that has to do with my, yes, now it's appearing, yes.
Okay. Technology, it's a fun world we live in nowadays. Okay, so I work for City of Antwerp on Smart Ways to Antwerp, which is part also of a CIVITAS PORTIS project. Quickly, what was CIVITAS PORTIS about? It was between different port cities, seeing how we can arrange more sustainable transportation, see the governance model, work on behavioral change, create a digital backbone to arrange everything, focus on freight, modal split also, and on new innovations. For those who don't know, Antwerp is the second biggest city in Belgium. It has the second biggest port of Europe. We have about 500,000 people, 1.5 million if you take the urban metropolitan region. About 250,000 commuters coming into Antwerp, and 50,000 students there. So it's quite a busy city. We also have one of the more congested ring roads of Europe. So we need to change that. So there's a lot of infrastructural works planned. The red parts are all the roadways we're going to change. We're going to do another river crossing. There's public transport infrastructure, bicycle infrastructure, a lot of infrastructural changes, which of course, before they are finished, lead to a lot of extra impact on mobility. So while those hard measures are being implemented, we also needed to make sure that Antwerp stayed accessible for both people and logistics. So for that, we focused on modal time and nowadays also a flex shift in mobility through soft measures. We use the 7E model for that, which should show up in a second if my computer wants to participate. So it's about enthusing, encourage, engage, experience, enable, exemplify, and enlighten users. So there's a lot of activity within Smart Ways to Antwerp that focuses on that. It's about raising awareness, communicating, building a strong brand, showing people what the challenges are, but also what the solutions are. There's an employers involvement where we involve all the employers to see how their employees can move around in a different way, how they can change their logistics, things like that. Of course, if you point out the challenges, you also have to point out the solutions. So for that, we have the marketplace for mobility, which I'll talk more about. We have a top-notch route planner and mobility map, which sadly enough won't be enough time to talk about that. A whole knowledge network, incentives, the MaaS ecosystem, which will also be touched, and then next mobility, which is a digital backbone to enable all of this. So first thing, of course, you can build a MaaS ecosystem, but if you don't have the right mobility solutions, it's still an empty box. So for that, we have the marketplace for mobility. So as said, the goal of the marketplace for mobility is make sure that there is a decent mobility offering, that there are solutions to the problems you have. So we've built a strong brand. We have a strong communication channel. So it's interesting for people to become a partner of Smart Waste Antwerp. So we do communication with them, we participate with them, we involve them, bring them together, all of that, which is a very easy, no-cost track for the players. Then we have project calls in which we do have some financial support, low level, but it's always transaction-based and preferably towards the end users, like a reduction in tickets and stuff like that. It's to support them to launch their solution in Antwerp without funding it completely. So it still has to be a valid business model stand on its own. Then there was a big traffic jam avoidance procurement, European thing, so bigger budgets, which we canceled because the return on investment was too low for us. And then we have a fourth track within those incentives, which is a trial offer. So if you look at the timeline since September 2016, we have had various project calls, some general, some very specific, like project call for MaaS, which I'll talk about more. But we got about 93 proposals, 51 projects which have actually been implemented, tried out. Some survived, some didn't, within 5 project calls. So that's roughly, quickly speaking, the marketplace to attract players, to have a networking, a place to network, to work together on all the components you need to have a decent MaaS offering, among other things. So the approach to MaaS in Antwerp is a bit different than most players. So a quick refresh on MaaS. MaaS, you have 4 levels. I think the basic level that we provide from Smart Waste Antwerp is level 1. We give advice on routing and pricing on all modes. The commercial players start at level 2, where you have a single tickets. Level 3 is subscription model, like WIM in Finland. And level 4 is where you have active participation of all the players in reaching your societal goal. That's the ultimate thing I think we all want to have one day. Then there's the different MaaS models. So you have the walled gardens, which I think none of us really want. You have the winner takes it all, where you have one app, most of it often provided by the Public Transport Authority, that does the whole integration. You have an integrator platform where everybody has to use it. Like I think Brussels is setting up something like that. It's all nice, but it doesn't give enough flexibility. So from our point of view, we want to have as much flexibility as possible. So we have an open ecosystem, which is a bit more complex to set it up, but gives great opportunities in new business models that can be generated. Now, reality is always a bit different. It's going to be, in the end, it's going to be a mix of some aggregated platforms, some multiple apps. It's going to be messy MaaS, I think some people call it, but it creates great opportunity. If you look at the current MaaS situation in Antwerp, here you can see a bit the mapping of all the players. So the yellow dots are MaaS providers, the green dots are mobility providers. I have to update it with all the integrations, so there's much more links between all the players, but it comes down to that we have all modes, all systems, and all models for mobility providers available in Antwerp. I think most MaaS providers have a pay-as-you-go. There were some with a subscription model, but that's still searching for the right, certainly the B2C business model. Prepaid options, mobility budget integration for B2B2E employee, and then all the different models. So we have a nice mesh of all different players. even mobility as a service, so integration in a banking app, KBC, which is, I think, very promising. And how have we been doing that? We've mainly worked together, co-created with all the stakeholders, basic principles, a quality framework for MaaS, which we are further developing, but also with the mobility players, like what is possible, which role should we take as a city, what do you have to take, understand that we all have our own goals, which might be different, but finding a middle ground. But also work on like clear uniform licenses for across all modes, build the technical infrastructure like the route planner that we've built, open that up to the MaaS players, because that is very interesting for them. Make sure that there's data pipelines set up so it's easier to integrate services, but all components and modules to work together on that. Another push we've given is that for most mobility providers in Antwerp, you need a license to operate. In that operating license, we have required a MaaS integration with at least 2 MaaS players as condition for the operating license. And then, of course, sharing data and things like that. And then the project call that I mentioned earlier. So within the project call, you can get 50% co-financing, a maximum of 50,000 K, focused on transactions realized. So this was a bit different. Some of that money could be spent on technical developments, but for example, for the car sharing, most of the money that they could get from that 50K is about how many times they can make sure that the car is rented through a MaaS app. In that way, it's a stimulus for both the mobility provider as the MaaS provider to make sure that it works. These were standard integrations, but what was nice is that we had a couple of newer integrations, which I haven't seen in any MaaS app, but that's carpooling, off-street parking, which is interesting to reach the car user and drag them into the MaaS solution. And then mobility vouchers that shops could give to their users. And then quickly, for a couple of further developments that we were still working on is back office for incentives to make it possible that various both MaaS players and mobility players can give incentives towards the users, improvements in the trip planner and opening up that API for third parties, further building that quality framework. So it's not real legislation, but it's more an agreement like, okay, this is how we work together. The technical backbone, make it even more solid so that it can be used by different parties, but also do developments and standardizations that can be used outside of Antwerp. And then the profile, I think, is very interesting evolution that we're working on too. So, and then, of course, there's one last thing. This is an actual campaign image that we used, I think, two years ago already, but it's more accurate than ever. I can assure you I have pants on, but I think one of the challenges now within MaaS is also trying to integrate the not moving around at all. So I'm really looking forward, like how we can do that. I don't know how it's time-wise, but I'm at the end of my presentation. If there are more questions, you can always contact me through various channels. And that was it for me.
Thank you, Stan. Very interesting. We have also a question in the chat from Sergio in Madrid. You made reference to a license model, and the question is this publicly available, and is this also available in English, or is this in Dutch?
It is in Dutch, but I can give the highlights on the parameters that we used. We have the parameters in there in that list that I showed in the presentation. They're not all implemented yet, but it's a list that we composed together with Brussels and the public transport authorities in Belgium on things that should be in there, like maximum number of providers should be in the license, even if you say it's unlimited, to make it easier to, because then you have to do only a minor upgrade of your license. instead of doing a complete rewrite and go through the whole approval process again. So it's those little things that we're also experimenting with and checking with all the players.
Yeah. Okay, so Sergio, you will have to do with a Google Translate, a thorough Google Translate. The second question is from anonymous, which makes me very curious who is behind that account. But no, the question is, of course, the city of Antwerp is operating as in a broader context. You have also a concept in Flanders of a mobility region, where the city takes an important lead. To what degree is the model applicable to the entire metropolitan area, or is it limited to the city of Antwerp?
No, I think it's the whole goal is to scale it up. That's also why we didn't want to create our own MaaS provider as a city, because then it's limited to the city but to make it scalable, everything that we do is with in mind for the vervoersregio, the traffic region in Antwerp, or even bigger. I mean, it's before COVID, Antwerp was the nicest piece of the Netherlands during the weekend. So we have to also look outside of the area. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Since you had a follow-up question, the license is for free.
Okay, and that means the entire trajectory. So also applying for the license, does that come at an administrative cost, or it's the entire process is for free? Yeah. Okay.
Or for the shared mobility solutions, taxi licenses are different government or is a bit different arrangement.
Yeah.
But for the shared mobility solutions, it's free.
Okay, good. Thank you. No, I was just thinking because if I have to pay for my ID if I go to the city, so maybe it could be there could be some kind of an. But okay, that I leave that up to the city of Antwerp. Thank you, Stan.
Money.
Okay. Yes, you'll stay on for the final Q&A because we move to Nuria Blanco Caballero from city of Madrid. Part of the ECCENTRIC project. So Nuria, the floor is yours. We are very curious to what you will say about MaaS in Madrid.
I will try to share my screen now. Okay, here. Okay. So,
that works perfect. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ivo. So, hello everyone. First of all, thank you, POLIS, for the organization of this interesting session, and all the audience for the interest. After the Antwerp one, I now will speak about the Madrid region and our local approach to mobility as a service. Well, first of all, I would like to start the presentation giving you some ideas about the mobility ecosystem of Madrid region. The region is composed by 179 municipalities, each of them with their own necessities in mobility, and 6.5 million of inhabitants, being the city of Madrid, where almost the half of the population is living now. In this context, the Madrid region created Consorcio Regional de Transportes de Madrid, CRTM, as the public transport authority of the region in 1986, with the main aim of covering the provision of public transport services to the whole inhabitants of the region. This creation has been possible thanks to the close collaboration between the Madrid regional government and all the municipalities of the region, because they gave the competencies in public transport to CRTM. So now CRTM manages all the public transport companies and operators due to different arrangements between them. For having an idea, we have in the whole region of Madrid more than 40 public and private transport operators. So the agreement between them and the characteristics of each of them do a complex ecosystem on Madrid region. The majority of public transport users of the region are users with dynamically timed information of the system at a regional level for the optimization of their trips. For this reason, giving particularized solution to user is one of the core points of CRTM from its creation. This has been evolved during the many years, and now this client-oriented approach that is in the DNA of CRTM from its creation is how we all know as mobility as a service. Related with that, now I will present to you two different approaches of mobility as a service that we are developing in the region. First of all, the multimodal mobility portal that we have created within the ECCENTRIC project. And after that, a MaaS governance model study that we are doing in CRTM. The multimodal mobility portal is one of the measures developed within ECCENTRIC project. It's a project composed by 5 different cities that have tested mobility solutions and created more measures, and one of the first projects that studied mobility as a service in depth. Now I will focus on one of the solutions related with mobility as a service that we have developed in Madrid region. CRTM within the ECCENTRIC project has developed a multimodal mobility portal where the information from different modes of transport is integrated in the portal, but not only information about public transport, but also information about other mobility services that are important for the management of mobility, such as the sharing services, information about municipalities related with the mobility, and any other kind of information that is important for mobility management. Thanks to this portal, citizens have access in the same place to a huge amount of information of the whole region. And not only that, but also in the cases that this information is put on an open data format, the portal is also an access point for the developers who want to make their own application. We have faced some problems during the planning and implementation phase due to technical problems and also political and strategic ones. Technical problems were ones related with the integration of all the information. We must integrate more than information from more than different companies, and that was very complicated for us. And also we have some strategical and political problems. In one hand, for the political decision of no allow to integrate us some data on the platform at the level that we want. Another problem that we face was the reluctance of some companies, most the share companies one, that don't want to share and open their data with all of us. The portal was finished in March 2019, and since its creation, we have discovered that the queries to the portal increasing an 11%, and we have supported the development and improvement of more than 18 mobile applications and 9 websites. We have also some lessons learned on the creation of the portal, like for example that the involvement from the very beginning of the process on the people that can make the decisions are very important, and the analysis, the detailed analysis not only of the data but also of the technical and functional requirements. And last but not least, we have also to take an eye always in the data protection issues when we made an open data portal. The second thing that I want to present to you is the MaaS governance models study that now is doing CRTM. CRTM is doing this study with the main aim of studying different governance models and their characteristics, and after that, the development on one particularized for the region of Madrid and our characteristics. We know that in relation between mobility as a service and public transport authority, a lot of benefits are presented for public transport authority, such as, for example, the increase of public transport demand, the improvement of public transport, the visibility of public transport network, or the improvement of the decision making. But on the other hand, we have some risks to face when we speak about mobility as a service, such as the user can change from public transport service to sharing modes, or the reduction of public transport visibility due to commercial activity of private sector. But we also know that the most important risk for the administrations is not being part of the implementation, follow-up, and leadership of the mobility as a service in the territory. For this reason, we have developed that study. We have divided it in different phases that we are now doing. By now, we have done a study about a general study about mobility as a service, studying the risks, opportunities, and challenges in mobility as a service. We have also studied the roles of the actors that participate in mobility as a service and the change that each actor will face. And we have also done an international benchmarking where more than 10 cities and regions that have developed mobility as a service in their territories have participated. And the last thing that we are doing by now is the study of different governance models. In the study, we have differentiated between the 3 different general governance models and the relation that these governance models have with public transport authority. The first of all is the aggregated public mass platform, the second, the aggregated liberal mass market, and the third one, that is a mix between the other two, is the disaggregated public mass platform. In the first one, the difference between them is in the first one, the public actors develop and operate a unique mobility as a service platform. While in the second one, different mass platforms on the same place with different integrators and with different levels of integration and public and private service are in the territory or in the region or a city. And the third one is a mixed one, where a public actor develops a mass platform with public modes integrated in the platform and with an open backend. And using the same backends, other developers can produce different solutions. So by now, we are studying in depth these 3 different models and trying to particularize them to our necessities. And what's next? What are the next steps that we are going to face now? We are now particularizing the benchmarking conclusion to our environment, choose and evaluate the appropriate model to the Madrid region characteristics, and after that, we want to implement different pilots to test different solutions on the model and their strengths and weaknesses in our region. Everything before the upscaling. With the end, we want to implement this mature system on the whole region, completely adapted to our necessities, to the necessities of our operators, but also, and the most important thing, particularized to the necessities of the users of public transport in Madrid region. And well, that's all that I want to say to you about mobility as a service here. So if you have any question or whatever.
Thank you very much, Nuria.
You're welcome, Ivo.
I don't see any questions appear in the chat or in the Q&A. I have a question for you. It's maybe a bit of a strange question, but
okay, I will try to answer.
No. It's just so you came up with the platform and the technical solution together with the coordination aspects of that first, and the study is later. At the moment you started with the technical part, with the platform and the service. Did you already know that you would have to look into the governance later, or did these governance questions came with the fact that you started a technical process?
It's the second one. We know that at the end the technical process is a difficult issue, but in some way we have faced it during our development of the authority. We have integrated information from more than 40 operators in CRTM, in the management center that we have there. So these technical problems, we have faced them. But we started to analyze them in another perspective when we start with the platform. We have to integrate other sources of information, not public one, but also the private one. And that's the strange part and the difficult part by now related to mobility as a service.
Mhm.
And for that reason, we thought that the governance model is the basis. We need to know what we need to study in depth, what we want, and a governance. And after that, with that done, we will face the rest of the things.
Mhm. Okay. There's also a question in the Q&A from
Yeah.
Sergio, which I don't know if it's a personal interest from the side of EMT in Madrid, or whether it's but it's a question which about the actual schedule for decision making, also on the model you will actually favor coming from the study.
Mhm.
Can you
Well,
shine
yeah,
a light on that?
yeah, related with the calendar and that we want to finish this part of the study with the assessment of which model put on practice on Madrid region. We think at the end of the year.
Okay.
And next year we want to start with a study of different solutions, different pilots. Okay, and after that it's always the procurement procedure and these things that nowadays are not as quickly as we want. So I think for next year
okay.
we will start with that.
Yeah, but it's good that there's an immediate
Yeah.
answer to that study. Okay, let's move to. Thank you, Nuria, and we'll move to Stella Aaltonen, who is working for the city of Turku in ECCENTRIC. And of course, if we are looking at Finland and we talk to MaaS, we have even higher expectations than what we have from other cities around Europe. Finland is the motherland of MaaS. And that also gave the city of Turku a bit of a different role in the ECCENTRIC project, looking at horizontal issues, the peer learning, managing the peer learning and activities around MaaS in ECCENTRIC, and also coming up with guidelines and readiness assessment tools around MaaS. So Stella, the floor is yours, and we're very interested to hear from you about these aspects.
Great. Thank you so much for the introductions, and thank you for POLIS for organizing this webinar together with Antwerp and Madrid. Yes, I'm talking in two roles, as a site manager for CIVITAS ECCENTRIC for the city of Turku, and also as a work package leader for Mobility as a Service for All and by All. And as pointed out in the very beginning by Ivo, was that we were really exploring mobility as a service. And when we were writing the application, it was a really new concept that was coming up. And we were one of the first projects to actually explore it. And for the past 4 years, we have had a really long journey actually on the line of the mobility as a service. And I'm trying to gather here what have been the main results of that journey and what we have come out as an outcome. The majority of our findings you can find in guidelines on how to implement MaaS in local context that was published, and you can find it and download it from the CIVITAS website. That will give you a further introduction and information about all the mobility measures we had. And that is a good way of going further. And I will introduce that as a main. What we explored during the 4 years is that we really need to focus on user needs. So what was also pointed out in policies findings in 2017, that was one of the core elements. And we came up with this kind of windmill example, where actually in the beginning in 2017, we developed the upper part of the windmill. And at that time, of course, we didn't know that it would become this kind of a symbolism, but anyway, we were developing the MaaS readiness level indexes. And at that point, we were realizing that we really need to look at the whole ecosystem and not just single measures separately. And also realize that there's a lot of needed to be done in developing the ground for mobility as a service to really flourish and actually look at the different issues there. And meaning that the prerequisites, the data governance, resilience, barriers and drivers in order to actually build up the system. And this was something that was really developed further and explored, and several cities, when they were using first the 2017 readiness level indexes, realized that it's not enough to look those, and that's why we were going deeper. I would like to highlight here two main issues that are actually the previous speakers already well established. These are the issues of resilience and data governance that became really an important part of actually finding out how do you want to implement mobility as a service and what kind of models are needed and what kind of guidelines. And several other publications have actually directed these issues of what kind of models are needed and what kind of IT systems. We were looking more into really a principle level issues, like what is the risk assessment? What are we actually wanting to gain through this? Are there modularity issues taken into focus? And interdependency, because what happens is that when we are moving different parts through the IT interfaces, APIs, is that we are linking different operators together, and then there becomes some interdependency issues and a lot of privacy issues come out. The different roles of data, the customer data, IDPR came during this time span, so we had to really into looking at data ownership, so who actually owns the customer data and what kind of information can be passed from operator to another, and even insurance issues, what kind of liabilities are going together with actually selling a package deal. So these are all issues that are really vital to understand. And then from that perspective, there was a lot of focus already at that time about stakeholder engagement. So that was kind of a really core pillar. And as Nuria pointed out well, it is a really important function that we look into the different roles of the local, regional and public authorities in this whole discussion about mobility as a service and develop the ground rules on that. And also look into the external and internal stakeholders, how are they actually engaged or being engaged as part of the process, not to forget about the politicians, and then develop the shared vision, whatever model that is, but actually developing the shared vision. But what was really evident that in understanding of the local authorities that we really need to focus in business models. And if we are not looking into the business models together with the stakeholder engagement, we are not developing viable solutions that would actually be standing on its own. So if you are taking the one leg off, actually we are then not really looking into what are the things that are creating the value for the customers and what are the desirable solutions that the customers really would like to benefit from. And then in the value deliveries, of course, how the package is offered, what kind of content it has, with whom, and what kind of data ecosystem goes around the delivery. Going back to actually those ground requirements. But then also, of course, the main issue is that the value capture, is there really a business logic? And is it really understood? And have we already actually separated in our thinking the desired outcomes and then the real impacts? And what are the real preferences? And the feasibility, they might not be the same things. So if we are not looking from the operator's side or for the business side, this issue at all, we might be creating solutions that are not standing in a lifespan of a longer period than actually the pilot area. And I think in the Antwerp case, it was really well established that you really need to be deciding and what is actually standing in the future, what is viable there. So the business models are really crucial for local authorities to look into, and the know-how on that area is not so strong yet in the cities, and this really requires a lot of understanding and also a lot of looking at the different dimensions of the whole system. Well, in CIVITAS ECCENTRIC, we had 7 measures, and I put here the caterpillars showcasing that they were actually looking into different sides of the whole model that we created. Is that this caterpillar is a symbol that what I want to highlight, that in each of the pilots that we had the head showcasing of caterpillar, that this is where we are aiming for, but actually the way we move towards like the caterpillar goes further, our ambition level grows and we want to enlarge. So in a way, all of those pilots were also in never-ending stories, in a sense that we only then realized that we need to work more on this topic. And actually there's an interconnection between the whole system. And these are the good ways of actually also looking into what are the things that we were imagining while describing the application in 2015. So what were the things that we were already then thinking? And as you can see, they are not grasping all of the issues in the project that we were bringing out. And majority of them really didn't look into the business scale at that moment at all, actually. Evaluation is a really important part, and we did a really thorough evaluation process in CIVITAS ECCENTRIC, and this is one of the short-term evaluation models that were created. And of course, the question always in these kind of cases is that as a long perspective, we would like it to reduce the use of the private car, but in the short term, it might not result in that. And there's a strong interdependencies of different actions, and they are going all or pointing all towards the back end, front end IT side, not to forgetting about actually investor interest in going further with the issue. So we really need to highlight these parts of it's not just public authority or someone else asking for operation cooperation and then providing it for the users. We really need to look into the whole grasp. And I think we came up really of showcasing what are the interdependencies in this area. There's always a question about what happened over the period of a project life cycle. Well, we have a good way of showing it because in 2017 all of our cities did the readiness level index, and now updated version where we got more and more levels in. And here's a picture of city of Turku, and actually I would say that with the green arrows pointing here, we got more wind towards our windmill to really highlight and speed up. So on those all areas we got to the next levels, and we were systematically working on in order to actually speed up the process. And as you can see, there's still a lot to work in towards actually gaining those identified potential areas to work on, because what we have not really realized as a city of Turku yet is that by the internal use of the city, we could actually speed up a lot of the operational sides in mobility as a service, because it's not always about just having our citizens or visitors as the customers. Cities themselves can be also the customers. So we've done a lot of groundwork about understanding how the process of mobility as a service is actually dealt in a city organization that was not used to actually this kind of working with the companies. So this legwork has gone further, and now we realized in the city that we really need to have a bigger role in coordinating these issues and also establishing that in our own organizational structure. And we've gained also some really relevant outcomes. So we've managed to integrate our bus tickets with event tickets. So as in the picture, you can see that the theater tickets, for example, are automatically tickets to the bus 3 hours before the show and 2 hours after. And now it's enlarged to several concerts and events. It was having a good rise in usage before epidemia, and I hope it will start again when the events are becoming more and more frequent. We managed to integrate more bike share as the first external operator to our public transportation ticketing, and now we have a platform ready to integrate any other services coming into our city. And what we were also working a lot is the back-end system of our public transportation, so that actually the customer data and all that would be working fluently. We managed to finally renew the parking policies, because that is one of the essential strategic focus areas that need to be renewed to support the car sharing companies, for example, and other mobility sharing companies. And then also we managed to establish good cooperation with service providers and gain a lot of mobility as a service contracts for our public transportation office, and also new operators to our city. And I would like to also here raise that although mobility as a service was a new thing, it was also very surprisingly how quickly the different mobility operators came. And now we are one of the highest usages in the world regarding e-scooters in Turku. So we have 2 operators currently, and we are having several more coming in. So basically this digital transformation about the services has been also really speeded up during this process of CIVITAS ECCENTRIC. And this is a really important milestone in a way that we have not just had these unexpected events, but also epidemia now is showcasing and highlighting the issue. So I think the windmill in our case will be blowing even faster in the future. thank you. So here was what I wanted to highlight today, and I'm ready to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Stella. We also posted the link to the guidelines in the chat, and also in answer to that, also Stan posted his permit information online as well. I'm very interested in the parking story. So that's the operational on-street issues related to parking, or it goes deeper into the overall parking approach, including off-street offer, integrated payment, etc.
Exactly. It started with actually realizing the licensing models of the parking and licensing kind of how the operators are able to access the different parking places. And now we've worked a lot on the data governance and data accumulation together and connects. And by that, we are then able to connect the services soon with the parking. So we can have a matches like Antwerp is showing, but we will in the future also be more dynamic on that. So we'll be developing the parking hubs in a way for the data side. Okay, great. Thanks. I would like to ask all the speakers to return to the screen now. And also, I would like to introduce my colleague, Laura Babillo. She's working on governance at POLIS. She also has authored together with the CIVITAS Policy Advisory Committee, the paper, the statement of the Pact on Public-Private Cooperation, and is also in a project called Mobimix, working on a concept note on current MaaS issues. So I would like to give Laura the floor to ask a couple of questions to the participants, while I'll keep an eye on the chat and the Q&A. Laura. Yeah.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Ivo, for that nice introduction, and thank you to all the speakers for very comprehensive and interesting presentations. I have a question then for Stella. We were seeing how, for example, Antwerp has already chosen their MaaS ecosystem with an open ecosystem. Madrid is still doing it. So I have a question about the guidelines. So can these indicators in a city that is already, that it's studying precisely their readiness and wants to decide what approach to take, can these indicators orientate a city towards the approach, meaning that if it should be public service oriented or private market oriented?
Yeah, the readiness level indicators that are updated, I mean, they are actually showcasing a good dialogue that you can have with the different sites, and also to establish the ambition level. And actually, they are not pro or con on any model. They are suitable for the discussion on all of the different models. And I think they are already mobility as a service publications that are thoroughly going to the different models. So I mean, this is a really important part, that it's kind of like a checklist. Have we thought about this, and is this something that we are aiming for? And I think this is exactly the result that we wanted to have, because what both cities were suffering is that they had a lot of salesmen coming and offering, we have a solution that resolves everything, and they did not even realize what are the things that we need to discuss about and take into consideration. And this is while we wanted to have these guidelines, that these are the issues that you would need to discuss and decide, and decide on the ambition levels and the areas.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have a question now for both Nuria and Sten, that you have presented how advanced you are, and the question is a bit to reflect to the start of the CIVITAS experience, and how do you think the readiness has evolved over this, what is it, 4 years, I think. So how ready do you think your cities are right now based on these general indicators, but how has this evolved on the past years? And yeah.
Sorry. I think for Antwerp, so we filled it in also the MaaS readiness index. We were on some parts we were already pretty ready at the beginning, but I think what mainly changed is that in the beginning we still believed very much that we were gonna cover it all. We had our Antwerp city card an NFC card that could be used anywhere. Just do some programming and we go. But that quickly showed that it's such a complex thing that you have to set up that as a city you cannot do it alone. So through the MaaS readiness index and that experience, it was clear like, okay, let's focus on some of the simpler things like the internal use. Let's already make sure that the internal minds change, that our alderman was quickly into MaaS, but that the rest of the administration could also follow and show that it's small measures you can take with big gains. And so there the MaaS readiness index helped to sell that story more internally. Like it's not, we don't need a full-fledged MaaS solution because that's a goal, that's a nice thing to have. We can already achieve quite a lot of things with those little steps. I think that's really the value there, to have a checklist, and it's independent of the MaaS model that you choose. So that's also interesting.
Thank you. And Nuria, what do you think?
Well, I think in our case it's a similar story because, okay, we started the MaaS with ECCENTRIC and we did the MaaS readiness level indicator, and we after that started working in our measure. And when we started with working with them, we realized lots of things, as I mentioned. Okay, the technical problems, the political one, all these kind of things that we realized that the model and the governance is a priority for us. And we now are doing the study also based on the guidelines that we made with Stella in the ECCENTRIC project, and we think that is a very good basis. And after that, when we have that, we are not going to put everything at once. We want to test first one thing, after that another thing, because it's the best way to solve the problems because they are more or bigger than expected. If we do little things, we can change them before having a huge problem related with MaaS in the whole region.
Okay, so it really turns out that these guidelines are a very, very good basis for cities that are working on MaaS. So for our attendees, please take notes. And I have a question. I think this one, Nuria already sort of answered it before about the timeline, about what are the immediate next steps for your MaaS projects. Nuria already did, but for Sten and Stella, perhaps, Sten, you gave us a good overview of what you want to achieve overall, but let's focus, let's look a bit into just the immediate future.
What's in the timeline for the immediate future is the whole incentive systems, making that possible for MaaS providers to integrate, because now it's both an administrative simplification for us if we do it, because now we have different portals and different systems to do all the different incentives that we do. So it is an optimization for ourselves, but it will also open up the ways we can give incentives to different users without having to go into individual contracts and procurements. So there, that's the first next step. And then together with that, you also have the mobility profile and personal data, where we're looking into my data principles so that the user is in full control of his tracking data that we need as a city to do some analytics. So I think those things are parallel and are actually the incentive platform will be put on the market in a project in December. And then the my data profile is being set up together with the Flemish government. So there we're still looking what would be the best timeline and achievable goals.
Okay. Yeah, we have to conclude. So Stella, maybe your final next steps, and then
is to settle the organizational model that we have in our city, because it's changing, and to establish a really a place where it's actually handled these issues, because now it's been a project based. So we want to really have it more established and systematize the work with the different operators and the companies, because now it's been basing on a project financing. So now really want to systematize and look further, how are we going to actually have them cooperate more together.
Okay, thank you. So I will close, not to end too late. Thank you, Laura, too, with a couple of next steps for CIVITAS, and I hope you see my screen. CIVITAS Satellite is coming to an end, and we are working on CIVITAS success stories, which are the stories of the remarkable CIVITAS cities, how CIVITAS has helped them, and they will be issued in November. There's also an e-publication on e-study tours coming on the 8th of December, and we are working with a broad partnership in CIVITAS on a topic guide for SUMPs and resilience in view of COVID-19, and that should arrive early 2021. And of course, as I have already said, we also have the webinar on MaaS in the framework of CIVITAS, also where we will discuss intermodal aspects, but also cross-border aspects of MaaS, and that's on 19 November. So I would like to thank all of you, Stella, Stan, Laura, and Nuria, for making this happen. What I take from the I would have wanted to end with saying it's the governance stupid as the closing statement, but I guess it's a bit more complex because you also have raised a lot of other issues, availability of services and incentivizing services, but also still the technology is also an issue, and all the data management issues coming with it. We have good guidelines provided by ECCENTRIC. We have best practice information from Antwerp that is available as well. Looking ahead in the webinar series, we look at user-centric electromobility next week on 3 November with the eCharge for Driver project. And we are also at POLIS looking forward to our conference, where we will also talk a lot about MaaS and MaaS-related issues happening from 30 November to 3 December. So I would, with 1 minute delay, like to end the webinar, and thank you all, and talk to you soon about other interesting urban mobility issues. Okay, bye.
Thank you.